When my son stood in my kitchen and told me I had to sell my house, the home his father built for us, with his own 2 hands, I didn't cry. I didn't shout. I just smiled. It was a small, quiet smile, the kind that comes from a place so deep inside you, it's already broken. He took that smile as agreement, as his mother finally being sensible. He patted my shoulder, like you would a child who has finally eaten their vegetables. "It's for the best, Mom," he said, his voice full of a relief that cut me more than any anger could. "You'll be free of the upkeep, and with the money, we can get you something modern, a nice little apartment closer to us." He always said we now. It never meant him and me, not anymore. It meant him and Lisa, his wife, their new, shiny life. My old life, this house full of whispered memories in every floorboard, was just a problem for them to solve. He left, thinking the matter was settled. I heard his car pull away from the gravel drive, the sound I'd listened for since he was 16 and borrowing my keys. The silence that followed was heavier than ever. I walked to the kitchen window. My eyes drifted over the overgrown garden, past the rusty swing set, to the old oak tree at the bottom, and I knew, in that moment, what I had to do, before I sold a single brick, before I let a stranger sleep in the room where my husband took his last breath. I had to dig. I had to find the box. My name is Evelyn, but for the last 58 years, everyone has called me Evie. This house isn't just a building. It's the story of us, of John and Evie. John wasn't a rich man. He was a carpenter. He had big, rough hands that could shape wood into the most beautiful things. He bought this plot of land when it was just a field on the edge of town. People thought he was mad. "What are you going to do way out there, John?" they'd ask. He'd just grin. "Build a home," he'd say. And he did. Every weekend, every evening after work, I'd bring him sandwiches and a thermos of tea. I'd hold planks of wood steady for him. Our son, Ben, learned to crawl on the subfloor. He took his first steps, holding on to a freshly sanded doorframe. The smell of sawdust and fresh paint is the smell of our early years. It's the smell of love, of building something from nothing. John made everything. This kitchen table, where I'm sitting now, the bookshelves in the living room, now bowed under the weight of photo albums and Ben's old school trophies, the little window seat in our bedroom, where I'd sit and watch the sunrise, his arm around me. Ben was our miracle, our happy, loud, muddy neat boy. This garden was his kingdom. He'd help John plant vegetables, his small hands next to his father's large ones, burying seeds with intense concentration. He'd run circles around that oak tree until he was dizzy and collapsed, laughing. John built him that swing. I can still hear the rhythmic creak 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 on summer evenings. The sound of pure childhood joy. Life wasn't always easy. Money was sometimes tight. There were worries, quiet arguments whispered after Ben was asleep. But the foundation of this house, and of our family, was solid. It was built on promises, on in sickness and in health, on "I'll always be here." John's illness came like a slow, gray cloud. It started with a tiredness he couldn't shake. Then the pain. The house grew quieter. The sawdust smell was replaced by the faint scent of medicine. But even in his hospital bed, which we moved into the living room so he could see the garden, he was my John. He'd hold my hand and talk about the rose bush we should plant come spring. He made Ben, then a teenager, all arms and legs and anger at the world, promised to look after the garden. "A garden needs tending, son," he'd say, his voice thin, just like people. When John passed, a part of this house went silent forever. The heart of its creaks and groans was gone. Ben held me tight that day, both of us crying in the kitchen. John built. "I'm here, Mum," he said, his voice cracking. "I'll always be here." For a long time, it was just Ben and me. The house felt too big, but it also felt like a warm blanket made of memories. I'd talk to John sometimes, telling him about my day. I kept the garden as best I could, though it was never as vibrant as when John's hands were in the soil. Then, Ben met Lisa. Lisa was different. She was from the city, sharp, beautiful, ambitious. She loved Ben, that was clear. But the first time she came to this house, I saw her look around. It wasn't a look of seeing a home. It was an appraisal. She saw the slightly dated wallpaper, not the story behind it. She saw the worn sofa, not the countless nights our family had cuddled there watching films. She smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. When they got married, I was so happy for Ben. My boy had found his person. I gave them John's mother's pearl necklace for something old. Lisa was gracious, but I later saw it in her jewelry box, tucked away, not worn. They bought a modern townhouse in the new development across town. All clean lines and white walls, no squeaky floors, no history. That's when the slow, gentle pulling away began. At first it was small things. Ben would visit less. "We're just so busy, ma'am," he'd say on the phone. His voice was always a little rushed. I'd hear Lisa in the background, talking about dinner plans or home decor. When they did come, the visits felt contained. They'd sit in the good living room, not the cozy den. Lisa would subtly wipe dust from the side table with her fingertip. She'd comment on the damp smell in the autumn, or how the stairs were a bit steep. "You know, Evelyn," she said to me one Sunday over tea, "this is a lot of house for one person. All this cleaning, all these stairs. You must get lonely way out here." "I have my memories," I'd say, patting the arm of John's chair. And Mrs. Henderson next door pops in. Lisa would just nod, a polite, closed-lipped smile on her face. Ben would look between us, silent. The comments became more frequent, more like suggestions. "Ben, imagine what this property would be worth now, the land alone," Lisa would say, looking out the window. "Ma'am, have you ever thought about downsizing?" Ben asked one day, his eyes not quite meeting mine. "Something more manageable." My heart would squeeze a little each time. "This is my home, Ben. It's your home." "It was my home, Mom," he said gently, but the words felt like a door closing. Things changed. Then, my first grandchild was born, little Maya. She was the light of my life all over again. I wanted to be the grandma. John would have been the one with cookies, stories, and a magical garden. I'd bring over homemade stews, offered to babysit. Lisa was always appreciative, but firm. She had schedules, sleep training, organic-only food. My stews were a bit heavy on the salt for a baby. My old, soft cot from the attic was not up to current safety standards. I felt clumsy, outdated, like a relic from a past that didn't fit into their sleek, new world. One afternoon, I was playing with Maya on their pristine cream carpet. I was making silly faces, and she was giggling that wonderful belly-deep baby laugh. Lisa walked in and stopped. She didn't smile. "Evelyn, we're trying to teach her calm play before nap time," she said, her voice cool. "Too much stimulation isn't good for her routine." I felt my face grow warm. The laughter died in my throat. I'm sorry. I know," she said, softening just a fraction. "It's just different now. We have our ways." Our ways. There it was again. I was on the outside. The distance grew. Invitations to their house became formal, for birthdays and holidays only. My offers to help were politely declined. Ben's calls became weekly. "Everything okay, Mom? Need anything?" It was the script of a dutiful son. Not my boy who used to tell me everything. The final straw, the one that broke the peaceful rhythm of my lonely life, was the fall. It was silly, really. I was trying to clear the gutters. John always did it. The ladder slipped. I didn't break anything, but I was badly bruised, shaken, scared. I called Ben. He came over, face pale with worry. He fussed over me, made me tea. It felt like my boy was back for a moment. But when Lisa arrived, the air changed. She stood in my cluttered, cozy living room, her designer handbag looking like it was from another planet. She looked at the steep stairs, the scatter rugs, the general lived-in-ness of it all, with a kind of quiet horror. They went into the kitchen to talk. "The house has thin walls." I wasn't trying to listen, but their voices carried. "Ben, this is a disaster waiting to happen," Lisa said, her voice low but urgent. "She could have been killed. She can't live here alone anymore. It's not safe. It's not practical." I know, Ben sighed. "But this is her home. She loves it. Love won't stop her from breaking a hip. We have to be the adults here. This house is an anchor. It's tying her down, tying us down. To think of the equity just sitting here. We could use that for Maya's future, for a proper holiday, for our future." There was a long pause. My breath caught in my chest. "What are you saying?" Ben asked, his voice tired. "I'm saying it's time. It's time for her to sell." And just like that, in my own kitchen, my fate was being decided. The home John built became equity. My life became impractical. I was a problem they needed to solve. A week later, Ben came over alone. He looked like he hadn't slept. He made small talk, his eyes darting around the room, never settling on mine. Finally, he took a deep breath and laid it out. The plan: the house should go on the market. It was too big, too old, too isolated. The money would set me up in a lovely, modern, secure retirement apartment closer to them. I'd see Maya more. It was the logical thing, the right thing. That's when I smiled. It was all I could do to stop the howl of grief inside me from escaping. He saw my smile and relaxed. He thought I understood. He thought I agreed. I'll need some time, Ben, I said, my voice surprisingly steady, to sort through a lifetime of things. You understand? Of course, Mum, he said, leaning over to hug me. He smelled of his expensive laundry detergent, not the wood smoke and sawdust of his father. Take all the time you need. We'll help you pack. After he left, the silence was absolute. I felt numb. I wandered through the rooms, touching John's fingerprints on the banister. The small chip in the kitchen counter Ben made when he was learning to chop vegetables. Every corner held a ghost. And then I remembered the box. It was the day before John went into the hospital for the last time. He was weak, but he'd wanted to sit in the garden. I helped him to his favorite bench under the oak tree. The evening sun was golden. He held my hand, his grip still strong. Evie, he said, his voice a soft rasp. There's something for you, for later. What is it, my love? I asked, brushing his thinning hair from his forehead. A promise, he whispered. I buried it, right there. He pointed a trembling finger to a spot at the base of the old oak, near the big, gnarled root that looked like a bent knee. When the time is right, when you need to remember, you dig it up. It's for you. Only you. I'd thought he was dreaming. The medicine, the fever. I'd kissed his forehead and said, I'll remember, darling. In the whirlwind of grief that followed, I forgot. But now, 20 years later, his words came back to me with crystal clarity. When you need to remember, I needed to remember now. I needed to remember him, us, the truth of who we were, before I let it all be sold away. The next morning, I put on my old gardening trousers and John's worn-out work jacket, the one that still, faintly, smelled like him. I took his old spade from the shed. My hands, now wrinkled and spotted, looked so much like his on the handle. I walked to the oak tree. The garden was a mess. Roses gone wild, weeds choking the vegetable patches. Ben never did keep his promise to tend it. I found the gnarled root. I started to dig. The earth was hard and cold. It was slow work for my old bones. But with every thrust of the spade, I felt closer to him. I was digging for my past, for my proof. And then, the spade hit something that wasn't a root or a rock. It was a solid thunk. My heart hammered against my ribs. I got on my knees, ignoring the damp earth seeping through my trousers. I scraped away the soil with my hands. There it was, a small, metal lockbox, green with tarnish but intact. John must have sealed it well. I carried it into the kitchen, cradling it like a newborn. I cleaned the mud off with a trembling cloth. The small padlock was rusted shut. I found John's old toolbox and used a pair of pliers. With a snap, the lock gave way. I opened the lid. Inside, there was no money, no jewelry. There were two things. First, a stack of letters, tied with a faded blue ribbon. My name was on the top one, in John's familiar, looping handwriting. Second, a sealed, official-looking envelope, yellowed with age. It was addressed to John. I picked up the top letter. I unfolded it, and I began to read. My dearest Evie, if you're reading this, I'm gone. And if I know you, you're probably being too brave for your own good. Don't be. It's okay to be sad. It's okay to be lost for a while. But I also need you to be strong. I need you to know something. This house, this land, it's not just ours. It never was. I read on, my tears blurring the ink. The letter told a story I never knew. John's family had owned this land for generations, not to sell, not to develop, to keep. It was his great-grandfather's farm. There was a wish, a hope passed down, that it would stay in the family, that it would be a place for roots to grow deep. The letter spoke of his love for me, for Ben. His dream that Ben would one day understand the value of what he had, not the monetary value, but the soul value, the value of legacy, of something that outlives you. I've buried the official papers with this letter, he wrote. Therefore, Ben, really, but you give them to him when you think he's ready, when he's become a man who can see more than just a price tag. It might take time. Be patient with him, my love. He's our son. His roots are here, even if he forgets. I love you, forever and always. Tend our garden. John. I cried then, deep, heaving sobs that came from a place of loss, but also of miraculous connection. He had been here with me all along. He had known, he had seen. With shaking hands, I opened the official envelope. It was the deed to the land, but as I read the dense legal language, My breath caught. There was a clause, a covenant John's great-grandfather had placed on the land. It stated that the land could only be passed to a direct blood descendant. It could never be sold outside the family without the unanimous agreement of all living adult descendants. And if there was any attempt to sell, and the descendant did not wish to live on the land themselves, it would revert to a local nature trust. It was meant to keep it safe forever. John had never mentioned it. He'd waited. He'd trusted time, and he'd trusted me to know when the moment was right. I sat at the table he built. The letters spread before me, the deed in my hand. The weight of the past and the sharp, painful present collided. Ben didn't just want me to move. He wanted me to sell our history, to break a chain that went back generations. And he had no idea what he was really asking. I didn't call Ben right away. I needed a few days. I needed to sit with John's words, to let them settle in my soul. I reread every letter. They were full of everyday love notes about how proud he was of Ben, how much he loved my cooking, his plans for a new shed. They were the ordinary, beautiful threads of our life. The final letter was the only one that spoke of the future, of secrets, of legacy. I felt a quiet strength growing in me. It wasn't anger, it was a deep, solid certainty. John had given me a gift, not just the legal protection, but the reminder of who we were. I wasn't just an old woman in the way. I was a keeper of a story. A week later, I invited Ben and Lisa for dinner, not at their house, here, in my home. They arrived, Lisa looking slightly apprehensive, Ben hopeful. I'd cooked John's favorite meal. The house was warm, filled with the smell of rosemary and roasting chicken. For a moment, it felt like old times. We made small talk through dinner. I asked about Maya, about their work. The conversation was polite, skating on thin ice. After dessert, I took a deep breath. Ben, Lisa, I said, there's something I need to show you about the house. Ben's eyes lit up, thinking I'd found old documents for the sale. Of course, Mom. I brought the metal box to the table and placed it between us. I saw Lisa's eyebrows raise at the dirty old thing. What's this? Ben asked, puzzled. This, I said softly, is from your father. He buried it under the oak tree the day before he went into the hospital, for me to find when I needed it most. I opened the box. I took out the stack of letters, keeping the last one and the deed in my hand. I handed the other letters to Ben. These are for you. Letters he wrote to me, about us, about you, about this home. Ben took them, his hands unsteady. He untied the ribbon. He read the first few lines of the top letter. His face, so often closed off these days, softened, then crumpled. I saw his throat work as he swallowed hard. He was reading about his first football game, about John's pride when he fixed a leaky tap, the small, lost memories of a father's love. Lisa watched him, her face unreadable. When Ben looked up, his eyes were shining. Mom, there's more, I said gently. I slid the final letter and the deed across the table to him. Read this one, and then look at the deed. He read John's final letter. I watched the color drain from his face. He read it twice. Then he picked up the deed, his lawyer's eyes scanning the legalese. He understood it immediately. His shoulders slumped. What is it, Ben? Lisa asked, her voice tense. A covenant on the land, he said, his voice hollow. He explained it to her, in simple terms. We can't just sell it, Lisa. Not unless Mom agrees. And if she doesn't, and we try to force it, the land goes to a trust. We get nothing. What? Lisa's voice was sharp, disbelieving. That's ridiculous. That can't be legal. It's her house. It's the family's land. Ben corrected quietly, still staring at his father's handwriting. It always has been. Dad knew. He knew one day I might see it as just an asset. He was protecting it, protecting her. The room was silent. The truth hung in the air, heavy and undeniable. So what does this mean? Lisa asked, her voice cold. It was my turn to speak. It means, Lisa, that this is my home. It will always be my home. And one day, it will be Ben's and Maya's. That was your father's wish, Ben, that our roots would stay here. I looked at my son. I don't want to be a burden, and I don't want to be far from you or Maya, but selling this isn't the answer. Maybe the answer isn't me leaving. Maybe the answer is you coming back. Ben looked up, shocked. Not to live, I said quickly, but to visit, really visit, to let Maya play in her grandfather's garden, to let her get muddy, to let her know where she comes from. This house has room for sleepovers, for Sunday dinners, for life. I reached across and took his hand. Your father didn't leave this to control us, Ben. He left it to remind us that some things are more important than money, that a home isn't an investment, it's a living thing. It needs a family. It needs love. Ben looked from me to the letters, to the deed. Then he broke. A sob racked his body. He put his head in his hands. I'm sorry, Mum. I'm so sorry. I got so caught up in the life, the image, what we were supposed to want. I forgot him. I forgot you. It was the first time I'd seen my son cry since his father's funeral. Lisa sat frozen, watching him. I could see the calculations in her eyes fading, replaced by something else, confusion, perhaps a dawning understanding of the depth of what she'd almost asked him to destroy. She stood up abruptly. I need some air, she whispered, and walked out into the garden. Ben and I sat at the table, John built, holding hands, crying together for what was lost and what was found. That was 6 months ago. Things didn't change overnight. Healing never happens fast. Lisa was quiet for a long time, but she watched. She watched Ben spend weekends here, not out of duty, but with a new purpose. He started clearing the garden. He found his father's old tools. He asked me questions about the roses. One Saturday, Lisa came with Maya. She didn't bring the designer bag. She wore old jeans. She watched Ben teaching Maya how to plant sunflower seeds in the spot where he'd planted them with John. She saw the pure, unfiltered joy on her daughter's face, covered in dirt, giggling as she patted the soil. Later, she found me in the kitchen, washing up. She stood beside me for a moment, then picked up a tea towel. "Can I help, Evelyn?" she asked. It was a small thing, just drying a dish, but it was a beginning. "Of course, love," I said. We worked in silence for a minute, then she spoke, her voice soft. "I never had a home like this," she said. "We moved every few years. Everything was always new. Nothing had a history. I thought that was better, cleaner." I nodded, passing her a plate. "A history can be heavy, but it can also hold you up." She looked out the window at Ben, lifting a squealing Maya onto the old, rusty swing. The creak 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 filled the evening air, a sound from the past, alive in the present. "Yes," she whispered. "I think I'm starting to see that. We haven't sold the house. We never will. Ben had the deed and the covenant properly filed with his lawyer. He understands now it's not a trap, but a promise from the past to the future. Now, my house is full of life again, not just my memories, but new ones. Maya's toys are in a basket in the living room. Her tiny handprints are on the window glass. The garden is waking up, tended by 3 generations. Ben comes over most Sundays. He cooks on the old stove. We talk, really talk, sometimes about John, sometimes about his work, sometimes about nothing at all. Lisa and I are learning each other. It's slow, it's careful, but there is respect growing, and maybe, one day, it will be love. The other day, I was in the garden with Maya. She was digging near the oak tree with a little plastic spade, helping her daddy. She found a worm and held it up to me, her eyes wide with wonder. "Look, Nana, a baby dragon." I laughed and nodded. "A very special one." She went back to her digging, singing a little song to herself. I looked at the oak tree, its branches stretching wide and protective over us. I thought of John's hands burying that box. His love, so deep it could reach through time and touch us here, now. Healing a wound we didn't even know was bleeding. He was right. A garden needs tending, just like people. We almost lost ours, to hurry, to forgetfulness, to the idea that newer and shinier is always better. But if you dig deep enough, even in the hardest, coldest earth, you can find the seeds that were planted long ago. You can find a love that was meant to last, and with a little care, a little patience, and a lot of forgiveness, you can help it grow again.